For decades, Gwede Mantashe has been one of the most recognizable figures within South Africa's liberation and political structures. A veteran of the African National Congress, ANC, a seasoned trade unionist, and a man whose political instincts shaped numerous turning points in post-apartheid governance, Mantashe's influence has never been in doubt. Yet, his recent removal from the South African Communist Party's SACP Central Committee has sparked fierce debates, raising questions about internal fractures, ideological battles, and the broader direction of the leftist movement in South Africa. At face value, his exclusion from the Central Committee might appear as part of routine restructuring within the party. But behind the carefully worded explanations lies a deeper political story, one rooted in mistrust, shifting alliances, and a growing divergence between Mantashe's political brand and the current ambitions of the SACP leadership. The real reason, as political insiders have begun to reveal, is less about logistics and more about ideology, power struggles, and the lingering shadows of state capture. To understand the magnitude of this development, one must first recognize the historical relationship between the ANC, the SACP, and COSATU. Together, these organizations formed the Tripartite Alliance, a cornerstone of the anti-apartheid struggle and post-1994 governance. Mantashe himself emerged from the ranks of trade unionism, later cementing his role as Secretary General of the ANC during one of its most turbulent periods. His alignment with the SACP was never incidental, it reflected a shared commitment to socialist values, workers' rights, and a vision of radical economic transformation. However, in recent years, Mantashe's politics seemed to drift. As ANC National Chairperson and Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy, he became the public face of government's push for coal and traditional energy sources at a time when the SACP and civil society were leaning heavily into climate justice and a just energy transition. For many in the Central Committee, his stance was no longer reflective of the socialist ideals the party wanted to promote. Another critical factor in Mantashe's removal lies in the shadows of the State Capture Commission. Although he was not found guilty of corruption, testimony and evidence linking him to Bosesa, including reports of home security upgrades paid for by the company, severely dented his credibility within circles that pride themselves on ethical leadership. The SACP has been at the forefront of denouncing corruption as a cancer eating away at South Africa's democratic project. For some comrades, retaining Mantashe on the Central Committee would have contradicted the party's moral positioning and weakened its standing in the public eye. Political analysts point out that the SACP is currently undergoing a generational and ideological shift. Younger leaders are demanding greater independence from the ANC, arguing that the Communist Party has become little more than a junior partner, losing its voice and revolutionary identity in the process. Removing Mantashe was symbolic, a way of cutting ties with the old guard closely associated with the ANC establishment. By sidelining him, the Central Committee signaled a desire to carve out a bolder, more independent socialist identity. In internal debates, this move was framed not as an attack on Mantashe personally but as a necessary reorientation of the party's leadership core. Yet, insiders admit that there were heated exchanges, with some veteran members expressing discomfort at the way a stalwart like Mantashe was handled. So far, Mantashe has chosen to respond with restraint, avoiding a public clash with the SACP leadership. However, those close to him suggest that he views the move as a betrayal, not because of the loss of position itself, but because of the erasure of his contributions to the movement. He reportedly feels that the party's leadership caved into populist pressures and ignored the nuanced reality of his role as a minister tasked with balancing economic imperatives with environmental concerns. The fallout from Mantashe's removal may stretch beyond the walls of the SACP. For the ANC, already facing declining support and internal divisions, the exclusion of a senior ally like Mantashe raises concerns about cohesion within the Tripartite Alliance. COSATU too, watching from the sidelines, may interpret this as another sign that the alliance is fracturing under the weight of unresolved ideological contradictions. Some observers argue that this moment could mark the beginning of a more assertive SACP, one that seeks to contest elections independently in the future. Others, however, caution that the party risks alienating senior ANC leaders whose cooperation remains vital for its survival. Ultimately, Gwede Mantashe's removal from the SACP Central Committee is not just about one man's political fortunes. It is about the soul of South Africa's left. Is the Communist Party still content to play a supporting role within the ANC-led alliance, or is it ready to redefine itself in a country where inequality, corruption, and unemployment are at crisis levels? By pushing out figures associated with compromise and controversy, the party may be betting on renewal, but whether that gamble will strengthen or weaken its influence remains to be seen. For Mantashe, the episode is another reminder that in politics, loyalty counts until it doesn't. The same movement he helped build has now deemed him expendable in pursuit of a new political narrative. The real reason, therefore, lies at the intersection of ideology, image, and internal power, a reminder that in South Africa's politics, no position is guaranteed, and no legacy is untouchable.